I've always been fascinated by the allure of old objects, their stories, mysteries, and perhaps the secrets they carry have always drawn me in. That's why, one Saturday morning, when I stopped by a garage sale in the neighborhood, an old wooden box immediately caught my eye. The box had a faded label on it, and a faint, dusty smell wafted from inside. The seller, an elderly man, gave it to me for $10. Without thinking twice, I bought it. When I got home, I opened the box. Inside were old photographs, a few letters, and a small diary. The pages of the diary were yellowed, and the writing had faded. At first, I thought these were just the memories of a family. However, as I started reading the diary, things took a turn. The diary belonged to a woman who had lived in the 1950s. She wrote about strange occurrences in her home, whispers coming from the walls at night, objects moving on their own, and an overwhelming sense of dread. Eventually, she decided to remove the box from her house and hide it away, vowing never to open it again. As I read these lines, a chill ran down my spine, but my curiosity got the better of me. That night, as I sat alone in my house, I began to hear strange noises. First, a faint tapping, then whispers coming from the walls. I remembered what was written in the diary and looked at the box. It felt as if something inside was trying to get out. Terrified, I closed the box and locked it in a cabinet. The next day, I decided to find the old man I had bought the box from. I told him about the diary and asked about the box's history. The man's face turned pale and he said, "You need to give that box back. The things inside, they're real. If you've opened it, they're after you now." His words frightened me even more. When I got home, I took the box out of the cabinet and threw it outside. But that night, I heard the same noises again. This time, they were closer, more distinct. In the morning, I found the box still in my yard. It was as if it had returned on its own. Now, I don't know what to do. I've tried throwing it away, burning it, everything but it always comes back. And every night, the whispers get closer. I guess some things can never be undone. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. I've been a park ranger on the Appalachian Trail for 2 years now. Lost hikers, wild animal encounters, late-night campers trying to sneak around, and even a few pranksters. I thought I'd seen it all. But patrolling the trails at night always kept me on edge. It wasn't the animals or the rugged terrain. It was the forest itself. After dark, it felt alive, as if it were watching. My colleagues used to say the trail becomes a different world after sunset. I never understood what they meant until that unforgettable night last fall. There's a stretch of the trail near my patrol area that's strictly off-limits at night. It's close to a ravine, and over the years, there have been enough accidents to warrant the ban. If I caught someone out there, it was my job to send them packing. But that night, it wasn't a camper that caught my attention. It was something no training manual could have prepared me for. It was just past midnight, and I'd been patrolling solo for a couple of hours. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No rustling leaves, no distant hoots of owls, just silence. Then I saw it. A faint, flickering glow through the trees far off the main trail. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but it was unmistakable. A soft, shimmering glow, like an old lantern. But who uses lanterns out here anymore? I stepped off the trail, keeping my flashlight low to avoid drawing attention. The light seemed to move, drifting deeper into the woods, as if leading me somewhere. I followed, though every instinct told me to turn back. The beam would flash through the trees, always just out of reach, always a little farther ahead. The air grew heavier, and my breathing sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness. Suddenly, the light vanished. I stopped, scanning the trees, but there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just silence. Then, as if testing me, the light flickered back on, farther away this time. I hesitated but kept going. The closer I got, the more the forest seemed to close in around me. Branches brushed against me, and the undergrowth thickened. Finally, the light stopped moving, hanging in the air like an invitation. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. Just as I got within a few yards, the light blinked out again, leaving me in complete darkness. I turned on my flashlight, sweeping it through the trees. Nothing. just empty shadows. Then I saw Eat a rusted ancient lantern hanging from a low branch. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. There were no footprints, no signs of anyone nearby. Just the lantern, swaying gently as if caught in a breeze. Though there was no wind, I don't know how long I stood there, staring at it. My rational mind screamed at me to leave, but my duty as a ranger held me in place. Reluctantly, I reached out and grabbed the lantern. It was cold and heavy, the metal rough with rust. I twisted the knob to extinguish the flame, plunging everything into darkness. I set it back on the branch and backed away, my hands trembling. By the time I made it back to the main trail, dawn was breaking. I didn't tell anyone about the lantern. What would I even say? But the experience haunted me. The next day, I returned to the area, searching for any sign of a campsite or hiker. There was nothing, just an empty stretch of forest that looked untouched for years. I still patrol that area, and I've never seen the lantern again. But sometimes, deep in the woods at night, I'll catch a flicker of light through the trees. Just a glimpse, as if something is still out there, waiting for me to follow. Now, whenever I see a glint or shimmer in the darkness, I keep my distance. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. 4 friends planned a camping trip to escape the chaos of city life. Our goal was to connect with nature, share stories around the fire, and sleep under the stars. However, what we experienced that night would become the most terrifying moment of our lives. When we arrived at the campsite, everything seemed perfect. Deep in the forest, by a small lake, we were surrounded by trees and the sounds of birds. We set up our tents, lit the fire, and laughed as we watched the sunset, breaking the silence of the woods. But when night fell, everything changed. As we sat around the fire, we heard a strange noise in the distance. At first, we thought it was just the wind, but the sound grew closer. A faint, rhythmic tapping, as if someone was knocking on stones. We all fell silent, listening carefully. The noise stopped, and we sighed in relief. But at that moment, a shadow passed behind our tents. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. The fire's light didn't reach where the shadow had disappeared. A sense of unease crept over me, but my friends reassured me that it was probably just an animal. As the night went on, the sounds of the forest changed. The birds had stopped singing, and even the wind seemed to have vanished. Everything was eerily still. As we sat by the fire, we suddenly froze at the same time. Behind our tents, slow and deliberate footsteps were approaching. The sound was unmistakable, but no one was visible. "If this isn't a joke, it's a really bad idea," one of my friends muttered. We stood up and pointed our flashlights in the direction of the sound. The beam of light caught something between the trees. A tall, thin figure. Its face was hidden, only a dark silhouette remained. "Hey, who are you?" I shouted, but there was no response. The figure stood there, as if watching us. Then, slowly, it backed away and disappeared into the trees. None of us slept that night. We sat in our tents, listening intently to the sounds outside. When morning came, the forest seemed normal again. Birds were singing, and sunlight filtered through the trees. But the fear inside us would never leave. As we packed up the campsite, we noticed something strange. There were tracks around our tents, but they didn't look like human footprints. They resembled the paw prints of an animal, only much larger than any creature that should exist in the forest. When we returned home and told people what had happened, no one believed us. "You guys just have wild imaginations," they said. But we knew the truth. That night, something was in the woods, and it was watching us.